It was meant to be this way. Otherwise, even the Christians would want to stay here. It's a troublesome place. It's a time of trial. It's not a place to call home. You have no peace here. Bunyan describes this going from the city of destruction, this world, to the celestial city, the next world, where there's peace and comfort. And as the pilgrim progresses here, you'll see he has more and more desire to get to the safety of the next world. Okay? Now, you're going to see in this story now, one of the things that comes up is that he gets a moment after his conversion of a real chance to rest a moment and catch his breath. And in life, what usually happens, whether you're talking about John Reed or Bill Moore or you, is we have peaks and valleys. And if you'll think about how your life really works, you have these really peaks of where everything goes right. And the one thing I know when we're eating dinner together is I should be able to say to you, now you know that right after this there's going to be a valley. Right? A valley of humiliation, just like our hero is going to enter shortly. And you say, well, I don't understand why that's necessary. The real reason it's necessary, if you're a Christian, is that God knows your temperament. Whenever things go well too long, it always turns to pride. It just sort of gets stale. If God doesn't keep you running through the gauntlet, you'll wind up with a pridefulness that'll smell like B.O. to me when I walk in the room. You won't notice it, but the other people will. You see? And so God, in His mercy, and because He's all wise, knocks me down, and I go through life like this. Oh, peak, valley. Peak, valley. Your life's like that too. You say, well, I don't think of it that way. Well, it doesn't mean it isn't that way. It just means you haven't thought of it that way. You need to assess your own life, go back and review it, and I think you'll find that what I just said is true of your life as well as mine. Why? Well, God governs our lives. God is wise, and He brings the trials or permits the trials that test us and prove us and improve us. And all of this is going on all the time, whether you like it, whether I like it, whether you understand it, or whether I understand it. It doesn't change the way the universe works just because Bill Moore doesn't understand it. It doesn't change the way the universe works because you don't understand it. God Almighty is certainly not limited by your limits. You have limitations. And most of the time when I meet you someplace, they're pretty severe. Okay? I mean, if you meet me, you'll find my limitations are really narrow. I mean, I just don't understand much about the way the world works. And all of the understanding that I do have has been gathered from the book. Now, if you don't even have the book to help you, well, you're probably in worse shape than I am. So, with our man here, he takes a breath. It's nice. God's provided a time of peace for him, and he lies down and goes to sleep. He goes to sleep. If you don't know it as a Christian, there's this time of sinful sleeping, and we've just hit it. He lies down, and when he lies down, one of the things that happens is the roll that he has with him, or the scroll, rolls away from him, but he's unaware of it. He takes a nice long nap, and he loses that scroll, and really in our case, in Bunyan's case, he's talking about the man's assurance. And really what happens lots of times when people, after they're converted, they feel so ecstatic about it that they get excited about the idea, and then the next thing that happens is they forget that they're really sinners saved by grace, and they become prideful. And they've fallen asleep in the arbor. It's a sinful thing to do. When you start saying, well, I guess God chose me because there's something special about me. I don't know what's wrong with the other guy, but I see the light now. I've seen the light. I don't know what makes for a guy to see the light, but I've seen it, which might make me somebody special. And I'm going to tell you in the plainest way possible, the one thing that made you special was that perhaps you sinned more than the other sinners. That's about all there is. This is all by grace. If you're a real Christian, there's nothing to be prideful about. The minute you have any pridefulness about you, it makes me sick. It makes me want to, if you were standing here right now, and I've been in the presence of people who are so prideful, that had I been able to conjure up vomit, I would have vomited on them. I've stood there and said to myself, is there any chance I could just puke on this guy? But I can't do it. Otherwise, you would see me spewing vomit occasionally on Christians. Never on non-Christians, but on Christians. Sometimes it just disturbs you and you want to make them a little filthy again to remind them where they came from. Now, that may seem crazy to you, but my emphasis is on this. When you're converted, it's because God has chosen you, not you him. He loved you first. You love him in return. He deserves the credit. You don't. You didn't want to turn from your sinful way till he opened your eyes, till he opened your ears, till he changed your heart. That's the way the Bible describes it. If you can find anything to boast about in there, you tell me what it is. What you should do is lower your head and be full of gratitude and thanksgiving that God would deal with such a one as you or such a one as me. That's Christianity. That's the gospel. If you want to come and shine your own little badge and show me your merit and tell me all the good things you do, all you are is a pretender hiding out in my church. And I don't like it. You know why? You might talk me into believing some of that nonsense and shining up my own merit badges. This isn't Boy Scouts. This is the gospel. You don't have any merit. You don't have one drop. Okay? Now, that's as plain as I can be about it. Please learn from our man's falling asleep in these things and falling into pridefulness. It seems what happened in Bunyan's life, it seems. He eventually, falling into pridefulness in your own self-righteousness will cost you your assurance for heaven, because I have my assurance that Christ is my assurance, not my self-righteousness. You depend on your own self-righteousness. When you find yourself failing, you'll lose your assurance. As certainly as Bunyan lost his scroll while he was napping. So, as our hero proceeds, he doesn't notice that he's lost his assurance or his role on the way, but he does immediately run into two new characters. One of them is named Timorous, and one of them is named Mistrust. And today, if we were going to rename them, we'd name them Fearful and Unbelieving. Timorous and Mistrust are the same as fearful and unbelieving. Okay? And he's headed up, and all of a sudden, they're coming down the other way. And he says, whoa, what's going on here? Where are you headed? And they say, well, look, we were headed to Mount Zion, the same as you, but we're going back. And he said, why? And they said, well, there's lions in the way. And they frightened us. We don't know. They're going to tear us to pieces. So Christian says, well, lions. And they say, oh, yeah, and they describe it, and they run on down the hill. And now our hero's faced with this thing, and he's kind of terrified, and he thinks about going back with them. And then he thinks to himself, well, the place they're going to is the city of destruction. I know that that's damnable. They're going to get destroyed. The whole place is going to get destroyed. So I can't go back, but I'm afraid to go on. And sometimes people get caught in that spot when they're trying to follow Christ. They know they can't go back to the world, but they're afraid to go forward with the church. And in Bunyan's day, to say it in a short way, remember, the church at this point is free during the 1650s. By 1660, it's going to be under bondage again, and we're going to see our friend back in prison here, going to prison shortly, in real life. Now, what ends up happening is he's disturbed which way to go. He decides he can't go back. He's going to press on. And then he reaches for this scroll to give him some assurance so he can get comfortable again. And it's missing. It's missing. And he starts weeping and cursing himself and trying to, what happened? I lost, and he starts thinking, where was I? How could I have lost this scroll? And then he remembers he fell asleep in the arbor when he should have just rested. He should have sat down and rested, but there's no time for a Christian to be sleeping. It's sinful to sleep while it's yet day. Life is short enough, folks. You have to run and clamber up that hill, and you have to do these things with some violence. Now, I'm getting ready to close, but I want you to think about your own Christian life. Is it possible that you're sleeping as you're walking? Listen, you're only here a short while. It's a dangerous place if you're a Christian. Push yourself to study, to learn, to stay close to the ordinances of baptism and the Lord's Supper, to stay near Christian friends. Why? It's a frightening place. It's a doomed place, but it's also a dangerous place while you're here because, like timorous and mistrust, you may be talked into going back to the city of destruction, going back to the world. You know what it is to have the values of the world. It's a painful, sad ending to the thing. So if you're a Christian, push yourself. There's a passage in Matthew 11, which I'll take up the next time, that says, heaven is taken by storm, by violence. And it sounds funny to people's ears today. But you need to push yourself. Heaven's won by violence. It's a study of violence. It's keeping yourself up late at night. It's a not allowing yourself to go into sin. All of those things. Tune in next week, and I'll give you a little update on it. Thanks.
For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb, and I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made in my mother's womb. I was never hid from you long before you ordained my days for me, before I ever came to be. How precious to me are all your thoughts, oh God. I fall asleep seeking to number them, for they are more than all the grains of sand.